The music stopped, the crowd hushed, and a cold silence fell over the screaming chaos. She looked at me, a victorious smirk on her face, but she didn't see the hand gripping the frayed wire, didn't hear the water pump groan its last breath. All she saw was her world, and mine, about to collapse into a single roaring tidal wave. The sun, a fiery disk of pure gold, hung low over the horizon, painting the sky in a blaze of orange and violet. For Maya, the sight was the culmination of weeks of meticulous planning. Every detail of her 30th birthday pool party had been curated with painstaking care. The floating lanterns, their soft, warm light already beginning to shimmer on the turquoise water, the custom playlist, a carefully calibrated mix of retro funk and modern pop that she'd spent hours perfecting, the artisanal taco bar, a nod to her favorite food truck. This wasn't just a party, it was a statement. It was proof that after a decade of hustle and setbacks, she had finally built a life she was proud of. The first 2 hours were perfection. Laughter echoed across the deck, the scent of grilling carne asada mingled with the clean, fresh chlorine, and the hum of conversation was a symphony of celebration. Her friends, a tight-knit crew who had seen her through thick and thin, were all here. They toasted her with bright tropical cocktails, their genuine smiles a balm to her soul. Even the unexpected early bird guests, distant cousins and work acquaintances, added to the vibrant, chaotic energy. Everything was exactly as it should be. Then, Jessica arrived. She didn't make a grand entrance. There was no theatrical pause at the gate. Instead, she slipped in with a group of mutual acquaintances, a ghost of her former self, at least in appearance. Gone were the ostentatious dresses and loud declarations. She wore a simple white linen dress, a study in quiet elegance that was, Maya knew, a calculated disguise. Jessica had been Maya's best friend in high school, a relationship that had imploded in a spectacular mess of betrayal and jealousy. They had drifted, then collided again in the awkward orbit of shared social circles, always with an undercurrent of unspoken resentment. "Maya, darling," Jessica's voice was a little too saccharine, a little too loud. She strode over, her movements fluid and confident, and pulled Maya into a hug that was more of a brief, perfunctory squeeze. "Happy birthday. The place looks quaint." The word hung in the air, a tiny needle pricking Maya's perfect bubble. Quaint. It was a dismissal, a quiet, passive-aggressive insult aimed at her home, at her effort, at her success. "Thanks, Jessica," Maya said, her smile feeling a little tight. "Glad you could make it." "Of course," Jessica replied, already scanning the crowd. "I brought a little something to liven things up." She gestured to a large black speaker box a young man was struggling to carry. "My new DJ setup. It's got way better bass than whatever you've got running." Maya's heart sank. She had a perfectly good, if modest, sound system. It was all she needed. "Oh, that's really not necessary. The music is working great." Nonsense. "My guy has a whole playlist ready to go," Jessica announced, waving the boy over to the main deck. He looked uncomfortable, clearly caught in the middle. "Just plug it into the main circuit. It'll be a game changer." The first ripple of unease spread through the crowd as Maya felt her control begin to slip. This wasn't a friendly gesture. It was a hostile takeover. She watched as Jessica's young associate fiddled with the wires, eventually overriding Maya's carefully crafted playlist with a blaring, aggressive track that immediately killed the laid-back vibe. People's shoulders visibly stiffened. The change in atmosphere was immediate and palpable. The easy chatter faltered. Now, instead of dancing and laughing, people were starting to stand around awkwardly, their eyes darting between Maya and Jessica. It was a silent, emotional tug-of-war, and Jessica was winning the first round. Over the next hour, Jessica's campaign of conquest continued. She reorganized the taco bar, moving the ingredients into a more efficient line and instructing the caterer to offer more premium toppings she had brought herself. She pulled a case of champagne from her car, a brand Maya recognized as ridiculously expensive, and started pouring it for guests, loudly declaring that this is a real party. Every move was subtle, yet designed to undermine Maya, to make it seem like her party was a well-intentioned but ultimately flawed attempt at something only Jessica could truly master. Maya felt a slow, simmering rage build in her stomach. It wasn't just the party anymore. It was about respect. It was about years of rivalry, of feeling like she was always in Jessica's shadow, always a step behind. She had worked so hard to build this life, to stand on her own 2 feet, and Jessica was walking in and trying to knock her off balance with a smile and a glass of free champagne. The tension reached a boiling point when Jessica cornered Maya's younger sister, Chloe, by the pool. Chloe was a shy, introverted artist, and Maya had always been fiercely protective of her. Jessica, with a predatory glint in her eyes, started to talk to her about her career, not in a supportive way, but in a condescending, backhanded manner. "Oh, you're still doing those little sketches," Jessica said, her voice dripping with faux pity. "I mean, it's a cute hobby, but have you ever thought about something with a little more practical application? My cousin is a real estate agent. He's looking for a social media manager. It's a great way to make some money." Chloe's face flushed red, and she looked down at her feet, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sundress. She had told Maya just last week how excited she was about a commission she'd just landed. This was a direct, cruel attack on her sister's passion and self-worth. It was the final straw. A cold, clear anger settled over Maya. The rage was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. This wasn't about a party anymore. This was about family. This was about reclaiming her own space from a parasite who had fed on her insecurities for years. She walked away from the conversation, not toward Jessica, but toward the house, a plan forming in her mind. Her perfect, meticulously planned party had been hijacked. Now, it was time to change the rules of the game. She went to the utility closet in the garage. The rhythmic, cheerful hum of the pool pump was the only sound besides her own frantic breathing. She knew exactly where the circuit breaker was. She also knew the sound system was on a separate outlet. A simple cut of the music wasn't enough. It would be a temporary inconvenience, a brief power outage. The real power, the true chaos, lay in the heart of the party, the pool itself. She knelt down, feeling the thick, rubbery texture of the pump's power cord. She could hear Jessica's laughter, a triumphant cackle that floated through the open door and into the quiet garage. Maya's fingers closed around the cord. The hum was a vibration of pure, clean power. But in her mind, it was the sound of everything Jessica was trying to steal. Her hands moved with a decisive, unhesitating certainty. She looked at the coiled, thick cord, and then her fingers gripped the plug. Back on the deck, Jessica was laughing, her hands in the air, a triumphant queen surveying her new kingdom. "See? A little bit of life. Right, everyone?" she was saying, her voice pitched to carry over the blaring music. And then, silence. The music cut out with a deafening abruptness. The floating lanterns on the water flickered, then died, plunging. The pool into an eerie darkness. The taco bar's lights went out, and a small gasp went up from the crowd. The entire deck was plunged into a sudden, unnatural quiet, broken only by the sound of rushing water, the sound of a large, heavy plug being pulled. Jessica's laughter died on her lips. Her head whipped around, her eyes searching for the source of the sudden darkness. She found Maya standing just inside the garage door, the power cord dangling in her hand. The only light was the fading twilight and the faint glow of the neighbor's house. "What did you do?" Jessica's voice was a choked, incredulous whisper. She took a step forward, her face contorting into a mask of pure disbelief. Maya didn't say. a word. She watched as a panicked, shrieking woman who had just started a fight with a stranger stumbled backwards and into the pool, letting out a primal scream as the water, no longer circulating, began to go still and cold. The silence didn't last. Sarah's piercing primal scream as she hit the water was a sound that seemed to tear the very fabric of the evening. It wasn't a scream of pain, but of pure, panicked shock. The splash was followed by a panicked cry of "I can't see anything! My head!" The sudden, complete darkness was disorienting, and the laughter and cheerful chatter that had once filled the air had been replaced by a chorus of confused gasps and exclamations. Jessica stood frozen, her triumphant smirk evaporating into a slack-jawed expression of pure, unadulterated shock. The queen of the party, now standing in the middle of a kingdom of darkness, her expensive champagne bottle glistening in the faint light of a few phone screens that were quickly being pulled out. Maya, however, was as calm as the sudden, still water of the pool. The quiet, cold fury that had driven her to this act had left her with a clarity she hadn't felt all night. She watched Jessica's panicked eyes dart around the dark deck, the realization of what had just happened beginning to dawn on her. The power was off, the music was gone, and the pool, her personal sanctuary, was now a dangerous, invisible void. "What did you do, you psycho?" Jessica shrieked, her voice a desperate, panicked rasp. She lunged forward, her hand reaching for Maya, but she stopped short as a man's furious voice cut through the chaos. "Sarah! Sarah? Are you okay?" A man, his voice laced with terror, ran toward the pool's edge. It was the stranger Jessica had been arguing with, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a face now twisted in a mask of fear. People began to converge on the pool, their phone flashlights creating a dozen dancing, chaotic beams that illuminated the water's surface. Sarah, the woman who had fallen in, was struggling to get her bearings. She was flailing, her dress and hair a heavy, soaking mess. A few people reached down to help her, pulling her onto the stone deck where she collapsed, shivering into a frantic, hyperventilating ball. "Call 911. "Someone call 911! The man yelled, his voice cracking with urgency. A few guests immediately went into action, pulling out their phones. The casual party had devolved into a scene of pure emergency. Jessica, her face pale, stared at the woman on the deck. Her carefully orchestrated plan of dominance had crumbled, replaced by a situation she could no longer control. "I'm fine. I think I'm fine," Sarah stammered, coughing up a mouthful of water. But her husband wasn't listening. He was on his knees next to her, his hand gently on her stomach. "Are you sure, honey? Is the baby—" He started to whisper, his voice now a desperate plea. The word hung in the air, a devastating silence falling over the crowd. "Baby." The sound system could have made a sound loud enough to shatter glass, but nothing would have been as deafening as that single word. The woman Jessica had antagonized, the stranger she had goaded into a confrontation, was pregnant, and because of Jessica's need to prove her superiority, this woman was now soaking wet, shivering, and potentially at risk. Jessica's eyes went wide. She looked at Maya, but Maya simply stared back. The look on Maya's face wasn't one of triumph. It was one of cold, righteous judgment. "This is your fault," Jessica said, her voice a trembling whisper. She pointed a shaking finger at Maya. "You're the one who pulled the plug. This is your fault." "Is it, Jessica?" Maya's voice was low, and it cut through the din of the crowd. She held up the plug she had been holding. "You're the one who started a fight with a woman you didn't even know. You're the one who tried to take over my party, who tried to bring a whole new system because mine wasn't good enough." Maya's gaze swept over the crowd. "She started this," she said, gesturing to Jessica. "She tried to make me feel small in my own home. She insulted my sister, who is an amazing artist, and she tried to push her way into a party she wasn't even invited to, a party she clearly thinks she's too good for. A murmur went through the crowd. Jessica's face was contorted in a mixture of rage and terror. The lie she had been living, the persona she had so carefully constructed for the evening, was crumbling. "What are you talking about? I was just trying to help," Jessica protested, her voice rising in a desperate pitch. "This is a ridiculous overreaction. I'm going to have to call the police on you, Maya. This is harassment, is it?" The husband, who had been focused on his wife, stood up and glared at Jessica. His voice was low and menacing. "You started arguing with me because my wife mentioned her new job. You said it was a waste of time and that she should get a real job." "This is not her fault," he said, pointing to Maya. "It's yours. You wanted a fight, and you got one." Just then, a pair of headlights swept across the yard, followed by the distant wail of a siren that was getting louder. By the second, an ambulance. Jessica's face went even paler as she realized the true weight of the situation. This was no longer just a petty rivalry over a party. This was a medical emergency, a pregnancy scare, and the blame was now falling squarely on her shoulders. As the ambulance pulled into the driveway, its red and blue lights pulsing in the darkness, the driver who had carried Jessica's speaker box to the deck finally found his voice. You know, that DJ setup you paid me to bring? The champagne you said was from France? I bought it from the liquor store down the street. It was a cheap bottle of sparkling wine. The DJ equipment isn't even for a DJ, it's just a speaker. It's an empty box. You just wanted to look important. The wires were all fake." He dropped the speaker, a hollow thud echoing on the concrete. The wail of the siren grew louder, filling the night. The wail of the siren became a scream, then a guttural roar as the ambulance came to a screeching halt in the driveway. Its flashing red and blue lights sliced through the darkness, painting the faces of the stunned party guests in a chaotic, pulsating rhythm. A second later, a police car pulled in behind it, its own lights adding to the surreal spectacle. The casual, celebratory atmosphere of the evening was now a distant memory, replaced by the grim, professional urgency of first responders. Paramedics, moving with swift purpose, poured out of the ambulance, their voices calm and direct as they made their way toward the pregnant woman, Sarah, who was still shivering and gasping on the deck. Her husband was already on his knees, talking to a police officer who had a notepad out, a stoic expression on his face. Jessica stood motionless, the empty champagne bottle clutched in her hand like a broken scepter. The lies she had so carefully constructed, the DJ equipment, the expensive champagne, the persona of a generous socialite, had all been dismantled in a single humiliating moment. Her face, illuminated by the harsh police lights, was a study in pure, unadulterated terror. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Maya watched, a silent observer of the unfolding drama. Her rage had cooled, leaving behind a heavy, hollow ache. This was no longer a personal feud. The consequences had spiraled far beyond a ruined birthday party. A second police officer, a woman with a no-nonsense expression and a short, severe haircut, approached Jessica. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to hear your account of what happened. I've heard from several guests that you instigated an altercation that led to this woman falling into the pool." Jessica's voice, when it finally returned, was a high-pitched, frantic whine. "I didn't. She was being aggressive. She started it, and Maya pulled the plug. She's the one who created this whole dangerous situation." The officer turned her gaze toward Maya. "Is that true, ma'am? Did you pull the plug on the pool pump?" Maya didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, her voice calm and clear in the midst of the chaos. "Yes, I did. I pulled it to stop the power to the sound system she brought." She gestured to the hollow speaker box on the ground. "She was trying to take over my party to make a statement, and I was trying to stop her." The police officer's eyebrows raised slightly, but she simply nodded, making a note. She then turned her attention back to Jessica. We have multiple witness statements, including from the man who delivered the equipment you ordered, that you initiated a verbal argument with the victim and her husband. He's lying. Jessica's voice was becoming more and more hysterical. He's a hired hand. He'll say anything for money. The hired hand, who was still standing by the speaker, shook his head. I'm a delivery driver, ma'am. I don't lie. I'm just trying to make an honest living. You paid me to bring this stuff and to say what you told me to say. I told the officer everything. Maya's sister, Chloe, who had been standing with a small group of friends, pushed her way forward. Her quiet demeanor was gone, replaced by a fierce, protective defiance. And she was being incredibly cruel to me, too, Chloe said, her voice shaking with emotion. She was mocking my art and telling me to get a real job. She wanted to make everyone here feel small. This isn't a surprise. This is who she is. The circle of guests around them grew tighter, a silent, damning jury. Jessica's gaze darted from one face to the next, seeing only condemnation. Her friends from her elite social circle, the ones she had so desperately wanted to impress, now looked at her with a mixture of pity and revulsion. Listen, officer, this is all a ridiculous misunderstanding, Jessica said, her voice dropping, a little, trying to regain some semblance of control. Maya and I have a history. She's just being dramatic. I'll take care of everything. I'll pay for any medical bills. Let's just call this a night and move on. But the officer wasn't listening. She was looking at the notepad, then back at Jessica. Ma'am, based on the statements of multiple witnesses and the fact that you admit to provoking an altercation with a pregnant woman, we are going to have to ask you to come to the station for further questioning. The victim is going to be taken to the hospital as a precautionary measure, and she intends to press charges for assault and reckless endangerment. The words hit Jessica like a physical blow. Her shoulders slumped. Her face, which had been a mask of defiance and denial, went completely slack. This wasn't a social faux pas, a minor embarrassment. This was a criminal charge. Her carefully constructed life, built on a foundation of lies and social manipulation, was about to come crashing down. As two more police officers moved in to escort her away, Jessica's eyes finally met Maya's. There was no anger there anymore. There was only a profound, silent accusation. Not of Maya, but of the universe. An accusation that none of this was fair. Maya looked back at her, her face unreadable. She didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel vindication. The cold satisfaction of pulling the plug had long since faded. All she felt now was a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. She had won the fight, but at what cost? The siren roared to life again as the ambulance pulled away, its lights a fading, pulsing beacon in the night. The police car followed, and as it drove away, Maya saw the pale, distraught face of Jessica in the back seat, her hands covering her face, her carefully manicured world now a shattered mess. The party was over. The perfect night was gone. All that was left was the still, dark water of the pool and the silence of a house that had been invaded and then, just as suddenly, abandoned. The party didn't so much end as it dissolved. After the flashing lights and blaring sirens had faded into the night, a heavy, awkward silence descended upon the deck. The remaining guests, their faces still pale from the shock, began to murmur their goodbyes. There were no apologies, no reassurances, just a collective, unspoken understanding that the perfect night was over, and they all wanted to be a safe distance from its fallout. Within 15 minutes, the last car had pulled out of the driveway, leaving only Maya, her sister Chloe, and a handful of their closest friends. The silence that followed was more deafening than the sirens had been. The only sound was the distant, rhythmic hum of the neighbor's air conditioning. The pool, once a glowing beacon of light and life, was now a dark, still void. The floating lanterns lay on the surface like drowned fireflies. Maya finally moved. walking over to the hollow speaker box Jessica had brought and nudging it with her foot. It made a pathetic, empty sound. "I can't believe she actually had a delivery guy carry an empty speaker," Chloe said, her voice a hushed whisper as if afraid of disturbing the peace. Maya didn't answer. She was looking at the still water, her reflection a warped, distorted ghost in the darkness. She had done it. She had won. Jessica was gone, humiliated, facing real consequences for the first time in her life. The vengeance she had craved had been delivered swift and true. So why did it feel so hollow? The cold satisfaction she had felt earlier had been replaced by a gnawing, anxious dread. "You know, you were right to do it," Chloe said, wrapping a gentle arm around her sister's shoulders. "I mean, it was crazy, but you were right. She had to be stopped." "Right?" Maya repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. "She's going to the police station, Chloe. A pregnant woman had to go to the hospital. All because of a pool party." "It wasn't about the pool party, Maya," Chloe said, her voice firm. "It was about her trying to take something that belonged to you and make it hers. She's been doing it to you forever, hasn't she? Trying to make you feel small so she could feel big. What you did, it was a breaking point. It was justice." Maya looked at her sister. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes held a fierce, unwavering loyalty that warmed Maya's chilled heart. She hadn't been alone in this fight. "Yeah, well, justice comes with a price," Maya sighed, her gaze drifting toward the front of the house. A movement caught her eye. At the end of her driveway, a car had stopped, its headlights off. It wasn't a guest. It was a black sedan with tinted windows. She watched as a woman with a sleek ponytail and a determined expression got out, a microphone in her hand. Her heart leaped into her throat. "No way! What's that?" Chloe asked, following her sister's gaze. Before either of them could react, the woman with the microphone stepped into the faint glow of the streetlights. She was holding a phone in her other hand, and as she spoke into the microphone, a small red recording light was visible. "This is Candace Thorne, live from the scene of a birthday party that has turned into a police investigation. Sources tell us a viral video circulating on social media titled Pool Party Psycho shows a shocking incident involving a feud between the host and one of her guests." Maya's blood ran cold. A viral video? The private, personal war she had fought in her own backyard was now a public spectacle. The moment she had so carefully orchestrated, the one that was supposed to be a small, private victory, had been captured. The justice she had delivered had just gone viral, and the world was watching. The reporter turned toward the house, her microphone raised. "We are currently trying to get a statement from the host, Maya Johnson. The footage, which shows the host dramatically pulling the plug on the sound system and plunging the party into chaos, has already garnered hundreds of thousands of views. But what it doesn't show is what led up to the incident and the aftermath." The woman began walking up the driveway, her face a mask of journalistic determination. The last traces of twilight were gone, and the dark pool behind Maya seemed to swallow the last vestiges of her perfect night. There was nowhere left to hide. Candace Thorne, the reporter, moved with the predatory grace of a professional. She reached the edge of the driveway, her face a serene mask of detached curiosity, the red light on her phone a silent, unblinking eye. "Maya Johnson? My name is Candace Thorne. I'm with News 7. Her voice was calm and measured, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. "I'm sure you're aware of the video that's currently trending, the one of you pulling the plug on the sound system." Maya felt a cold, paralyzing wave wash over her. It wasn't just a video, it was a viral video. The private, contained act of defiance had burst the seams of her carefully controlled world and was now a public spectacle. She wanted to scream at the woman, to demand she leave, but her voice was stuck in her throat. Chloe, ever the fierce protector, stepped in front of her sister. "You need to leave. This is a private residence. We have nothing to say to you." Candace smiled, a practiced, polite curve of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "I understand, but the public wants to know. The video is captioned Pool Party. Psycho, and it paints a very different picture from the one your guests are now posting on social media. There are two sides to every story, and a lot of people are curious about what would drive a person to such a dramatic act. This could be your chance to tell your side." Maya's mind was racing, telling her side. But what would she say? "She tried to take over my party. She was mean to my sister. She brought a fake DJ setup and cheap champagne." It sounded petty. It sounded exactly like the kind of petty drama the internet would eat up and then spit out. She was already pool party psycho. No matter what she said, the headline was already written. "Please," Maya finally said, her voice a thin, reedy whisper. "Please, just go." Candace seemed to consider her for a moment, then she nodded. "Fair enough. But the story will be on the 11 o'clock news, and without your input, it will be based solely on the footage and the witness accounts we've already gathered." She turned and walked back to her sedan, leaving the two sisters alone in the eerie silence of the night. "What do we do?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling. "They called you a psycho. On the news." Maya shook her head, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter anymore. This whole night, it's just a complete disaster." Meanwhile, miles away, Jessica sat in a sterile, brightly lit interrogation room at the police station. Her hair was a tangled, wet mess. Her once pristine dress was crumpled and stained. The police officer from the party was there, along with another more senior officer, a public defender, a tired-looking woman in a poorly fitting suit, was also present. "So, Mrs. Albright," the senior officer said, his voice a low rumble, "you admit to verbally harassing the victim?" "I admit to nothing," Jessica snapped, her voice still raw with indignation. "This is a gross overreaction. I was having a conversation. She was the one who was rude." The public defender placed a placating hand on Jessica's arm. "Jessica, the witnesses are all saying the same thing. They're corroborating Ms. Johnson's story. It's best if we cooperate." Jessica scoffed. "Cooperate with what? A bunch of losers who don't know the first thing about real social life? This is a private matter. It's a misunderstanding. It's certainly not a criminal matter." The senior officer slid a tablet across the table. Jessica's face, now puffy and blotchy from crying, stared back at her from the screen. Below it was a headline. "Pool party turns violent. Host pulls the plug as pregnant woman falls in." Below that was the video from the party. Her heart began to pound in her chest. "We have a lot of media interest in this case, Mrs. Albright," the senior officer said, his tone unwavering. "Assault and battery, reckless endangerment, those aren't misunderstandings, and you're looking at some very serious charges." Jessica's eyes widened in horror. But the video! It makes Maya look like a lunatic. Doesn't that count for anything? She's the one who pulled the plug." The officer leaned forward, his voice a low, chilling whisper. "The video shows her pulling the plug, yes. It's dramatic. But your own words, and the words of a dozen witnesses, tell a different story. They tell a story of a woman who instigated a confrontation, and whose actions had serious consequences. The narrative isn't about her overreaction, Mrs. Albright. It's about your cruelty. The internet has already decided you're a villain. Do you know what a good attorney can do with that kind of public opinion? They can bury you." Suddenly, the door to the interrogation room opened. A well-dressed man with an expensive suit and a stern face walked in, his eyes fixed on Jessica. He was a lawyer, and an expensive one at that. "I'm with Albright and Associates," he said, handing the public defender a card. "My firm is representing Jessica Albright. She's not a flight risk, and she's not a threat. We'll post her bail." Jessica's face broke into a relieved, grateful smile. She had been saved. Her family's money would get her out of this mess. But then the man's eyes met hers. There was no warmth in them, only a cold, professional disappointment. "Jessica," he said, his voice flat. "Your father is furious. We need to go now." The public defender looked at the new lawyer, then back at Jessica. "You're lucky," she said, her voice devoid of any real emotion. "I can't imagine what your life must be like." Back at Maya's house, her friends had all gone home. She and Chloe sat on the edge of the pool deck, their feet dangling just above the dark water. The silence was absolute. "I just saw the news," Chloe said, her voice shaking. "It's all over the internet. People are calling you a hero. They're saying Jessica is a monster. They're saying you stood up to a bully." Maya looked at her, confused. But the video? The headline said psycho. Yeah, but the comments, they're all on your side. People are digging up old stuff on Jessica. Someone found an old social media post where she was bullying another girl in college. They're calling her Champagne Jessica. Maya's phone buzzed with a notification. A text from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it. It was from the husband of the pregnant woman who had fallen in the pool. "My wife is okay," the text read. "The baby is okay. We're home now. Thank you for what you did. You stood up for her when no one else would." A small, simple text message. And then Maya's phone buzzed again, this time with a different kind of notification, a news alert. The headline was short, blunt, and devastating. "Woman who fell in pool files lawsuit against host and instigator." The victory Maya had felt, the relief, the vindication, all of it evaporated in an instant. This wasn't over. It had only just begun.